So about a month ago, y'all asked me to make a video on how to rig every soft plastic type out there, from Senko to craw to creature bait to drop shot, and I did that. I showed you guys how to rig every single one on camera, and it blew up. So with the popularity of that video, a lot of people in the comment section wanted to see, Tyler, how do I fish all of those? You showed me how to rig them, but now how do I put them in the water and catch fish on them? So that's what we're gonna talk about in today's video. How to take all of these soft plastics, stick them in the water, and have some bass fishing success. Let's talk about it. Well, how's it going, guys? My name is Tyler and welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad that you guys are here to become better bass anglers along with me. Now, my gosh, that video blew up. I had no clue that it was going to get that many views, and I'm so glad that it was an instructional video that blew up and gained a whole bunch of subscribers that are obviously very into learning about how to become better bass anglers, because the comment section was filled with people with tons of video ideas. And one of those was to take all the soft plastics I rigged in that video, take them on the lake, and actually show y'all how to catch fish on them, how to work them effectively. And so this is going to be pretty high level video. I'm not going to go into detail about exactly like the nuances on how to work each lure, but I will link with every single technique that I have. I've probably at this point made an instructional video going kind of diving deeper into that specific one. Now again, reminder, if you guys have not seen the video I filmed before this one on how to rig all of these soft plastic lures with the hooks and the line, all that jazz, make sure you guys pause this video and go watch that one real quick. It is an excellent precursor to this video right here. And if at any point in this video you're confused, of course, pause and go back and watch how I rigged all these. So with the Wacky Rig, almost always throw it on a spinning rod. I'm not gonna get a whole lot into gear. I do that more in the videos where I go kind of dive deep into how to fish specifically each one for 10 to 20 minutes. I make plenty of videos about that every single year. So I'm not gonna go a lot into gear. But with the Wacky worm, you cast it out there, of course around any kind of shallow cover structure, grass, wood, skip under docks, any kind of thing like that, and you let it sink to the bottom. Now, as you'll notice, I didn't cast it out there. Let me make a recast here. This is a huge issue with a lot of people first fishing soft plastics, is they cast it out there, they stop their bail, and they start working it. That is wrong. No, don't do that. With soft plastics, almost always, we're gonna talk about two of these. I think only two of these you're gonna wanna work off the bottom, and one of them, you only wanna work off the bottom half the time. And so especially with a Wacky Rig, you wanna cast it out there. I'm casting it right up next to a nice grass line. I watch my line as it lays on the water, and I watch the line kind of go out. And as soon as the line stops going out, I know that the bait has hit the bottom. So then I reel in my slack. I take the rod tip like this, and I go from I guess a 3 o'clock angle or a 90-degree angle, and I kind of lift the bait up to a 12 o'clock angle, and then I let the bait sink. So I let that slack line do its work with the bait sinking down to the bottom. Then I reel in the slack with my reel, and I repeat the process. Up like that, let it sink down to the bottom. Now, of course, you're gonna have little nuances where you can give it a few like kind of hops as you go up, but the whole motion of lifting it off the bottom and letting it sink back down is the same regardless of how you're working a Wacky Rig. That main general work is the exact same of all Wacky Rigs. And so whether you're fishing a weedless, whether you're fishing a Nico rig, any sort of Wacky Rig soft plastic, you are casting it out there, lifting it up and letting it drop back to the bottom. And any bite you feel is gonna be some sort of little tick, or usually with a Wacky Rig, a fish eats it and runs off with it. So you're gonna see your line going this way, and you just do a simple, if you haven't watched the hook set video I did, I show you guys exactly how hard to set the hook for all of these lures. So I'll link that video down below as well. And so it's just a simple kind of like lift up, and then you start reeling. And that is the Wacky Rig. So with that one done, we're gonna talk about the Texas Rig Senko. The Texas Rig Senko is one that I talk about all year long. This here is, I guess the Senko is the name brand for them, but this here is the Strike King Ocho. I think the Ocho is one of the best soft plastic Senkos out there. And so, as kind of the name implies, it is a sink, it's a Senko. You know, you want it to sink very deep and very far. And so just like the Wacky Rig, you want to cast it out there, really anywhere you want. It can be an open bank, it can be structure, whatever. And you let it sink to the bottom. as I mentioned earlier, it's very, very important for almost all these. You let them sink to the bottom. Now with this one, I may employ a kind of a lift. I may employ a faster hop like that, or I may let it sink to the bottom and then drag it, just like this. So you're gonna have to test out different retrieves to find out which one the bass prefer, but it is pretty simple. You let the stick bait sink, as the name is called, a Senko. Let it sink to the bottom. Of course, if you're in, with any of these soft plastics, if you're in any water deeper than 6 to 8 feet, you probably have to add a little bit of a bullet weight to the front of the soft plastic before you rig the hook on, or a belly weighted hook for a lot of these works as well. It's where the weight of the hook is actually like cemented onto the bend of the hook. And so instead of being a bullet weight on the top. And so just very simple. All you do with the Texas Rig Senko, cast it out there, let it sink. As you can tell, I never really engage my spool until I actually see that it's fully sunk down to the bottom. And then I just lift it up like this and let it sink. And oftentimes you'll feel a very distinct thud when you're throwing one of these, and you reel down and you set the hook. So with the Texas Rig Senko out of the way, we're gonna talk about the Texas rigged creature baits. So this here is a Strike King Space Monkey, one of my favorite soft plastic creature baits. And I think I talked about 2 or 3 different variations of this in my rigging video. I'm just gonna kind of talk about the broad categories. Most of the time when I'm working these, it is kind of generic across the whole board as to how it goes. You can fish a Space Monkey, you can fish a beaver style bait, you can fish a big game hog, brush hog, more traditional creature bait. They're really all about the same. And I work this one usually with a bullet weight on the front just to get it down there a little bit. Sometimes weightless, mostly with a bullet weight. And I'll cast it out there, and guess what I'll do? You guessed right, I'll let it sink to the bottom. Now with the creature bait, I am mostly slowly kind of lifting to the side, so it's like more of a lift drag, or I'm totally dragging it. There's not many times, unless I'm like hopping it on a jig head, that I actually take a creature bait and I hop it like this, like I would with a jig or with the Texas Rig Senko. Most of the time I'm casting it out there and I'm kind of pulling it to the side like this, usually with one hand, and just feeling the bottom just like this. A drag is fully dragged down like this. Occasionally I do that if I have it on a Carolina rig or a heavier Texas rig out deep. But if I'm fishing fairly shallow, it's kind of at a 1.5 to 2 o'clock angle of your rod tip, and I'm kind of just slowly pulling and letting those claws down there do their work. So again, creature bait is pretty dang simple, and as long as it's on a Texas rig, it has the same power hook set as your Senko did. Jumping back to the spinning rod, we're going to talk about a few finesse soft plastics, starting with the Shaky Head. So as y'all probably saw from that clip, I actually included the Ned Rig soft plastic with the Shaky Head, and that is because the retrieve for a Ned Rig and a Shaky Head are very, very similar, if not identical. And so like I said, I'm back on the spinning rod right now. I'm going to give it a nice cast out there, and especially on this one, you want to let it hit the bottom. There's no argument for working a Shaky Head or a Ned Rig off the bottom, unless of course you're giving it a huge hop. But in that case, you're always letting it sink down to the bottom. Especially Ned Rig, it exemplifies a crawfish perfectly, and so you never hardly ever see a crawfish just kind of swimming through the water with its I guess it'd be more of a weird tail movement. But like I said, you let the Shaky Head sink to the bottom, and almost always I'm working it very slow, and I'm going to keep my rod kind of at a 1 o'clock, I'd say, or 11 o'clock, depending on which way you're looking at the clock. And I'm going to use my reel to take in the line, not my rod. So with a Texas rig, I'm going like this, and I'm lifting and then reeling in my slack, hit the bottom, and then lifting again. With this one, I'm actually going to be using my rod to kind of like slowly bump it across the bottom, and then almost consistently reeling in with my reel. And so Shaky Head's out there. I'm not going to be going from this angle to this angle like I did. Oh, I had a fish. That was nice. I was doing it right. But like I was saying, you want to kind of like hop it very, very small hops. I'm talking maybe 6-inch movements of the rod tip, and your hand, because it's more at the base of the rod, you're only moving that like an inch or two. And so it's tiny little hops. Sometimes I will, give it very, very slow drags with a few hops, but you want to make sure you're maintaining contact with the bottom, because the point of the shaky head is, of course, is a finesse presentation, but that head gives you good contact and feel with what's down there on the bottom. And so I'm going to throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom, and if I was just kind of like hopping it like this, like a Texas rig, honestly, it wouldn't even be any different than a Texas rig. The advantage of a shaky head is that you have that head that can shake the worm and really entice those bass. And so I have it down there, kind of give it some shakes like this, maybe reel in my slack a little bit, some more shakes, maybe a bigger hop, let it sink, some more shakes. That's why it's called a shaky head, because you're supposed to shake it. Shake it off, Taylor Swift. And the Ned Rig has the exact same situation. You want to cast it out there. It'll usually be a lighter presentation than a shaky head, so of course you're going to have to use a different rod. Shaky head, I use a 7-foot medium. Ned Rig, either 7-foot medium light or 7-foot medium, but I usually verge on the medium light for a Ned Rig, just because it is a lighter lure, takes more effort and sensitivity to feel what's down there. And with both of these, I'm usually throwing them in more than 8 to 10 feet of water, usually around the 15 to 20 feet of water mark. And so that is the kind of finessey shaky head Ned Rig. Now it's time we talk about the drop shot. The drop shot, I believe, is one of the most confusing soft plastics to work, because there's not a whole lot of very, very simplified information. A lot of people catching giant fish on them, but I have not seen a whole lot of videos really showing how they work, because honestly, it's super simple, but it looks really complicated. You see it and you say, well, there's like a 10-inch, 12-inch, 2-foot leader, and then there's a weight, and then there's a hook. What do I do? So when I was first, bass fishing, I'll kind of show you guys what I did with a drop shot that's totally wrong, and maybe some of you guys think this way out there. I would make sure the weight hit the bottom, and I thought that in order for the drop shot to be effective, I had to move the worm without moving the weight. So keep the weight on the bottom, and I had to move the worm just about 8 inches from the floor or from the bottom of the lake to just when the line gets taut against the weight on the bottom, and that is totally wrong. Most of the time, those fish are not even going to notice the fact that the weight is down there. The reason why a drop shot is so special is because it keeps the bait off the bottom, and your weight is just there to weigh it down. And so, much like the shaky head, I'm going to cast the drop shot out there and let it sink to the bottom. Again, never forget that. Tattoo it on your left cheek. Let it sink to the bottom. And once it gets down there, I'm not going to employ usually any kind of hop method. It's mostly going to be kind of the shaky head, where I'm kind of going to shake it a little bit and then kind of maybe give it a drag. And then reel in my slack, shake it a little bit, and kind of give it a drag. Because most of the time I want that bait to be as far off the bottom as possible, and having your rod tip high like this will definitely help with keeping your bait in whatever zone you want to keep it. But most times I just want to keep the bait off the bottom in some way, and that's what makes the drop shot so special. Now, of course, the drop shot hook set is going to be very, very light. I talk about that in my hook sets video that I linked below. But you just want to cast it out there, and the bite on this one is going to be pretty dang light. You usually don't feel a thud on a drop shot. It's almost always, you're kind of hopping it, and all of a sudden one of your hops gets a little bit heavy. And as soon as you feel that, you kind of reel down and just set the hook like this. Drop shot is super easy to work. Don't be confused by the fact that the hook and the weight are separate from each other. It is a very, very simple tactic that catches some awesome fish. So now that we've covered all of our bases when it comes to finesse fishing soft plastics, let's go to one that is not finesse, and that is the punch bait. So I talked about the punch bait a little bit. It is definitely more of a niche application if you're a beginner bass fisherman, and especially if you don't live around any sort of lakes with grass or vegetation or lily pads. I would suggest against punching, because the goal of punching or flipping a heavy weight on a soft plastic is to get those fish out of heavy cover. If you don't have access to heavy cover like grass or vegetation, I would say you skip this part. But when you're throwing a punch rig, of course it's going to be very heavy. You're going to want to flip it out there right into the middle of the mat, right on the edge of the vegetation, really anywhere, kind of figure out where those fish want to be. And then you reel in all of your slack, and just like the Texas rig, you have your rod tip like this, and you give it a quick hop up like this. Maybe even kind of 2 hops as you go up. You work it 1 to 4 times per area. Then you reel it in and give it another flip out there to another piece of cover or vegetation. Let it sink to the bottom. Give it 1 or 2, 3 hops, 1 big hop, let it sink again. All right, that area is exhausted. I'm gonna go back over here, flip it out again, let it sink, boom. And this is a lot more fast action, action-packed type of bass fishing, and usually not casting this. Of course, never dragging it. It is almost always a flipping and pitching type of technique. So I'm just kind of finding a piece of grass. That looks good out there. I flip it out there. I let it sink. I hop it once or twice. And that bite is gonna feel like somebody just lit a fire under your lure, and so you're gonna have to light a fire under that fish and set the hook like your life depends on it. So punch rig is fairly simple, but it's definitely one of those techniques that not everybody has access to or really wants to do, but it is one of the biggest large fish producers. So if you wanna catch a giant, punching is definitely the way to go about doing that, and I showed you how to rig it in last time's video. Now, after we've talked about every lure that goes on the bottom of the water column, let's talk about one that actually doesn't go on the bottom but stays on the top, and that is a topwater ribbit frog. So I think the kind of proper term for it is either ribbit frog or buzz toad. We'll call it a buzz toad for now. Ribbit frog is, I think, a specific brand. But this here is the Strike King. Honestly, couldn't even tell you which frog this is, but it's a buzz toad, which means it is a topwater soft plastic frog, not a hollow belly, but as you saw me rig it in that last video, it is meant to go on top of the water. And the key with rigging this one is you don't want it to sink. Of course, any soft plastic is going to sink at some rate, so of course you want to have the frog hook or a 4 or 5/0 wide gap hook as I have here, and you do not want to let it sink. So I see a lot of people, especially when they learn to throw a buzz bait or a buzz toad, is they cast out there, they let it sink, and then they reel on their slack and start reeling. And at that point, that thing is already sank 1 to 3 feet. So by the time you reel in your slack and get that bait to the top of the water, you've lost 4 to 5 feet of potential, fish catching target zone. And so just like with a buzz bait, of course, this is a little bit less crucial because buzz baits sink faster. I want to cast it out there, switch my hands, and as soon as that thing touches the water, I'm starting my retrieve back to the boat. There is no such thing as letting this thing sink. I don't think I've ever caught a bass, maybe on accident by letting it sink, but it's almost always casting it out there, switching hands, and starting your retrieve as soon as it hits the water. Now, one important thing about the retrieve itself is that you want to have your rod tip up, because the way that this bait works is that the action, the sound, comes from the little paddle tails here on the frog. And so if your rod tip was down, it might be pulling the head of the frog into the water, which causes these to have to work a lot harder to push water and create vibration. But with your rod tip up, it kind of lifts the nose of the bait, and it really allows those legs to easily move and easily make vibration and noise. So like I said, cast it out there, switch hands, hits the water, you engage, and I keep my rod tip high. And as I talked about in my hook sets video, if you get a bite, it's not an immediate set. It is a stop reeling, reel down, and set like this. And you'll get a lot more fish in the boat by working it that way. Moving on with soft plastics that you don't let hit the bottom, we're gonna talk about the flashy swimmer. The flashy swimmer is one of my favorite ways to catch bass, and that is because it is super versatile. You can work this thing in any sort of cover situation, whether it's rocks, grass, docks, lily pads, anything like that. This thing is a very versatile lure for that. And if you missed the rigging video, it's pretty simple. You just, almost bad, you screw the soft plastic swim bait into the screw lock of the hook, and then of course you Texas rig it or Tex pose it, just like I talked about, and you have a little blade down here. And with this one, it's almost always a cast and reel retrieve. So I'm not hopping it, I'm not twitching it, not giving it any jerks. I'm casting it out there, letting it sink, depending on how deep you want it to sink. So if you're fishing really, really shallow, you might want to start engaging the reel right after it hits the water. That way it can't get down into any grass or cover. But like you're fishing right now, I'm fishing a little grass flat here. It's kind of 4 feet deep. So if I want to tick the top of the grass with this, I'm going to make a cast out there. I'm gonna let it sink, 2-3 feet, so 1 to 2 seconds. And then I'm gonna start reeling, and it is just kind of a slow, steady reel. You know, the bait itself, of course, the tail has kicking action, and then the blade underneath the hook has action and attraction and flash. And so there's not really any sort of retrieve you need to do besides just casting and reeling. Sometimes I'll do a stop and go, so I'll be reeling and then I'll stop, let it sink a foot or two, and then continue again. Maybe when I continue, I'll speed it up for a second to kind of get any fish that may have been following it. It stopped, they kept looking at it, and it speeds up and they just have to eat it and catch up to it. But it is a very, very simple cast, reel, and any kind of bite you feel is going to be very similar to a bladed jig or a chatterbait, and that's going to be your line just kind of goes slack and you feel a thud, and that's when you reel your line in fast and set the hook just like that. Sticking with the bait fish imitation, we're going to talk about one that's kind of a hybrid between working very, very fast in the top of the water column and working slowly on the bottom, and that is your soft plastic jerkbait. If you had to ask me what my favorite pond lure is, I'd probably say either a lipless crankbait or a soft plastic jerkbait. This here is a Strike King caffeine shad. I love this thing because it imitates both bluegill and any sort of clear, translucent white bait fish. And what makes this lure special is that there's actually a lot more ways to work it than there is a normal Texas rig. So I do have it on a 3/0 wide gap hook right here, but I'm going to cast it out there, and depending on the mood of the fish is going to be how I work it. So if those fish are schooling on bait fish, say a shad spawn situation, and they're really ravaging a bait fish population, you're not going to want to let it sink to the bottom because you don't have to. You can make way more casts, a lot more presentations into more areas, and probably catch more fish the faster you work it. So if I'm going to cast it out there for a shad spawn type deal, cast it, let it sink a second, and then I'm going like this. I'm going twitch, 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 almost like walking the dog with a top water, and I'm twitching this thing very fast while keeping it 6 inches to a foot under the surface, sometimes breaking the surface with it, and oftentimes a fish will come up and just slam it. So like you saw there, very, very fast retrieve, let it sink a foot. This retrieve for the soft plastic jerkbait is very popular when you have very aggressive fish, like schooling fish, any fish that are eating a herring population, so herring shad, like Hartwell, like Kiwi, any of those herring lakes, or really any time you have bass that are just gorging themselves very, very much on shad. But the other way that I like to work it is similar in a sense to the Texas rig, where let's say if bass are eating a bluegill, so I throw a green pumpkin or watermelon red colored fluke, I'm going to cast it out there, usually weightless if it's shallow, and if it's any deeper than 5 feet, I'll throw it on a belly weighted hook. I love the way it shimmies down with a belly weighted hook, really looks like an injured bluegill. And then any deeper than 10 feet, usually don't throw a soft plastic jerkbait, usually opting for some other kind of technique. And so cast it out there, let it sink to the bottom, and I'm gonna, instead of lifting it up, I'm gonna kind of give it 2 or 3 jerks up. So kind of imagine looking down at the bait and you see the soft plastic jerkbait kind of go boom, 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 and then float back to the bottom. So it imitates what you would see as a bluegill kind of dying as it falls down, and then kind of gives a few last little spurts of energy and then dives back down again. And almost all of your bites, if not all of them, will come after you've popped it 3 times and it's starting to sink back down to the bottom. The bass will grab it and you'll kind of pick up and feel your line, or on your next hop up, you'll feel the pressure on there, and then you'll lower your rod tip down and set the hook. So soft plastic fluke, very, very versatile, and one of my favorites to catch bass all around the country. Is that it? I think that's it. Have we done all of them? There's no way. Well, la-di-da, I think we did all of them, folks. That was a blast to show you guys exactly how to work all of those. Now, like I said, this is high level. I have different videos on my channel of explaining kind of more intricacies when it comes to each one of these lures, as well as catching fish on all of these. So I will link, of course, all the lures that I talked about, the videos I talked about, and everything else down in the description below as always. And thank you guys for watching. It is awesome to see the channel blowing up right now. I love the direction we're taking it, and I'm having a ton of fun. I hope you guys are as well as part of Team TRF. Now, if y'all are interested in going fishing with me and possibly winning an $80,000 bass boat, it is an awesome charity for muscular dystrophy. Make sure you guys purchase your tickets before the month of June ends. That way you guys are entered into the fishing trip raffle with me. And we'll see y'all next time on TRF.